Senator, nobody plans more and looks at more contingencies than our department, and so of course, undertaking a historic effort like this, of this scope and scale, of course, the Strait of Hormuz was front and center in every single aspect of that. Hence why one of our key objectives to begin with was to sink the entirety of Iran's Navy, which its conventional Navy was sunk. Now, you can't get rid of every single fast boat and every single machine gun and a fast boat or every single coastal cruise missile. So we acknowledge that if the state decided to become a terror state shooting at commercial shipping, that would be an ongoing and contested part of the battle, to include their willingness to mine international waters. So one side weaponized the strait, and we can fight back.
Completely aware that the Strait of Hormuz could be closed, and obviously sinking their ships has not affected their ability to effectively close the straits.
We had U.S. boats that surrendered to Iranian ships under the Biden administration. So their Navy was effective in
we're talking about a war you started, not a situation in which oil was flowing freely. There was no conflict. We weren't losing personnel as a result of Iranian actions. So your fallback to the Biden administration is just a very, very obvious excuse for what I think is probably, as you described so often, gross negligence. You did not fully inform the president that you would be in a situation where the Strait of Hormuz could be effectively closed, oil prices could surge, and effectively the Iranians could maintain their ability to strike back as they are right now. They just killed some of our servicemen last weekend.
This battlefield and all the dynamics of it, of which the chairman and I are responsible for ensuring the president understands every branch and sequel of what could happen, and we did. So the fact that those contingencies all were part of the possibility, and we understood that, is all the more reason why President Trump deserves the kind of praise he should get for undertaking this effort, having the courage to ensure that crazy Islamists can't have a nuclear weapon to hold us at issue. And he's been willing to stay true to that regardless of the challenge.
Excuse me. So he should be praised. He should be praised for starting a war without authority, creating a situation in which the world economy is suffering tremendously. We have to have extra money for our farmers, and we have no outcome, at least no realistic outcome in sight yet. Let me switch to General Kane. General Kane, these airstrikes have not yet deterred and defeated the Iranians. Do you think airstrikes alone will do that?
So I think academically, as you look across the totality of history, air power's got limits, and we always have to be mindful of those. I think where America's area of exclusivity is when we bring the totality of the diplomatic, informational, economic, and pair that with the military, and there's a lot of that work going on.
Well, the military, the next step would be escalation by ground combat. Do you anticipate that escalation?
Sure, I think it'd be unhelpful for me to opine on hypotheticals. What I can tell you is we always develop an unbelievable amount of options and the associated risks, and then my main job is to always ensure that leaders understand those options and the risks.
Now, if you employ ground troops to seize objectives, which I would assume be the first stage, are you prepared for an extended guerrilla war, which would likely happen in that area?
Sir, with all due respect, I think it'd be unhelpful for me to opine on hypothetical situations, on whatever decisions the president may or may not take in the future.
Have you advised the president that a ground combat would be very expensive in the lives of our soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, and also could probably lead to an extended unconventional war in that area? I don't see the Iranians sort of throwing their hands up saying, welcome to Iran.
Senator, I always advise the president on a range of military options and all of the risks that are contained within that, but I have to keep my military advice to the president private, sir.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Hoeven.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary Rollins, I want to thank President Trump. I want to thank you for including...
Hi there, everybody. It is just after 4 p.m. in the East. We are going to return to Capitol Hill to watch what is taking place there in just a moment. Pete Hegseth is testifying. He is before the Senate Appropriations Committee asking for money for Donald Trump's deeply unpopular and deadly war with Iran. as that war appears to be spiraling out of the Trump administration's control, its popularity plunging, and money and munitions for it running low. Pete Hegseth's testimony today represents the first time he's answered senators' questions about the conflict in months, and it comes amid a rather dire budget crunch. The Washington Post reports this, quote, "The Pentagon faces an urgent budget shortfall caused largely by the war in Iran, with some critical lines of funding set to run out within weeks, even as Donald Trump escalates the conflict with Tehran." That is according to lawmakers and current and former U.S. officials. The Trump administration is seeking $80 billion with a B to cover the cost of fighting and to replenish the depleted weapons supplies. Despite Donald Trump's money problems, he is still eyeing a potential escalation of the war with Iran. On that, Axios reports this, quote, "Trump is nearing a decisive fork in the Iran war, with U.S. and Israeli officials envisioning only two viable end games. Option one, pursue a new 10-day ceasefire aimed at reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Option two, launch a massive joint military campaign with Israel to force Tehran's capitulation. Trump hasn't made a decision yet, but officials believe the next few days will determine which path prevails, with little room left for the grinding, open-ended conflict now paralyzing the Gulf. And while Donald Trump contemplates getting us into or trying to get us out of the kind of forever war he vowed never to involve the United States in, without any money to pay for it, American troops and their families are paying the ultimate price, making the ultimate sacrifice. Sergeant Michael Emmanuel Swinton, 30 years old, of Fayetteville, North Carolina, has been identified today as one of the soldiers who was killed in action over the weekend. His mom spoke to local news yesterday and said this, quote, "He loved his job, he loved his country, and he loved the leadership in this country. He deserves to be honored. He loved his children, and he loved his wife," she said. Pete Hegseth on Capitol Hill today, being forced to answer for Donald Trump's growing quagmire, is where we begin today. Watching along with us for the duration, staff writer at The Atlantic, Tom Nichols, is here. He's a professor emeritus of national security affairs at the U.S. Naval War College. Also joining us, military analyst Lieutenant General Mark Hertling is here. He served as the commanding general of the U.S. Army in Europe. I'm going to come to you in a second. Let us listen in for one more second here.
The pressure on and achieve our objectives. Tell us where we are in getting that accomplished.
Senator, I think that's a really good point. That's effectively what we did to create the pressure that led to the circumstances of the MOU, which was we're running a route where ships, and we did it covertly in cooperation with Gulf countries and others who were willing to take some of the risk with our protection and then maintain the blockade. So effectively, oil's coming in and out, oil prices are coming down, but our blockade is staying and the pressure is mounting on Iran. That's something we have done and can continue to do. We moved into an MOU where Iran said we won't shoot at shipping, and then the IRGC turned around and decided to start shooting at commercial shipping again. At which point the president, as he should, cannot tolerate that, and so we respond, as he said 10 times, you shoot at ships, we're going to shoot at you overwhelmingly, which we have been doing now for, I believe it's a 10th consecutive evening. So consequences come with the willingness to shoot at commercial shipping. Our blockade has been reimposed and is effectively impenetrable. We got seized a ship inside the Arabian Gulf as well. So there's a lot of different angles to it, a lot of levers we can pull, and ultimately a lot of the strikes that Admiral Cooper and CENTCOM have been undertaking are taking Iran's ability to see and sense away in the Strait of Hormuz, which has tactical benefits for us.
And that's what this funding is about. This funding is about making sure that we and our allies can operate in the Strait of Hormuz, which helps bring down energy prices for every single American consumer, and that we force Iran to meet our objectives. Isn't that what this package is all about?
This is a peace through strength package.
Right.
That's what 1.5 trillion has always been about, a generational investment at as the chairman alluded to, a step change moment. We need to be able to do it at speed, at scale, with autonomy, with AI, with exquisite high cost and low cost, to be ahead and stay ahead so that you're not just able to do what we need to do in the Strait of Hormuz, but deter adversaries like Russia and China from getting involved in future contingencies.
And just General Kane, for any follow-up that you would like on that issue.
Sir, I wouldn't have anything to add.
Okay. Again, thank you, and thank you to all of our men and women in uniform. We appreciate them so much.
Senator Shaheen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary Hegseth, since you last testified before this committee, we finally received the spend plan for the $400 million FY26 appropriation for Ukraine security assistance. This funding was passed back in January, and now there are only 3 months left in this fiscal year. And while I appreciate that we now see what most of the funding is intended for, I just heard from the CEO of one of the manufacturers of the defense articles that are contained in the spend plan that they not only haven't received funding, but they haven't even seen a contract. So when are we going to see a contract for those defense articles that are contained in the spend plan for Iraq? For Ukraine.
For Ukraine. Senator, I'll have to get back to you on the specifics of the timeline of that. I'll talk to our policy shop as well as the EUCOM commander to determine where that's at.
Well, you've told this committee that you've barely spent half of the $150 billion in reconciliation funding. And if you still have $75 billion available, why are you asking the American people to absorb the cost of a war they don't support, instead of asking for transfer authority for unspent reconciliation funding, especially if you can't even get $400 million in Ukraine funding out the door?
As I mentioned earlier, Senator, that money from the One Big Beautiful Bill is otherwise allocated to the rebuilding of our military with priorities of the president like Golden Dome for America and hypersonics and other munitions investments that we made up front as we tried to adjust the Biden budget into an America First budget. And so reallocating that away from those priorities.
Good evening, this is Elder G again. See, this is how the scheme works. This is how BlackRock, President Trump, Pete Hegseth, and it was Kristi Noem and Pam Bondi, all these people, they all in the clique. And President Trump's son, Eric, and Donald Trump Jr., and Barron Trump, they invest in Trump money in defense spending. All those bombs that we using, Donald Trump is going to make billions and billions of dollars because he invested. Him and his friends is going to be the one that's getting all the contracts to replace all of these bombs. But let me tell you something that they can't replace. They can't replace the life of your sons and your daughters that's gonna die. With Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth and them and Kash Patel and them, it's just all about money. Donald Trump already told you that 8 billion people in this world is too many people. So he's saying that at least 3 billion people has got to die. All they care about is money and power and trying to keep that evil regime in power for life. 90% of MAGA, 90% of the 7 million people, that they still support Donald Trump 100%. While your sons and your daughters die, and your gas go over $4 and $5 and $6. That's all they care about. That's what white supremacy is all about. Just watch Viking and watching Viking Valhalla. That's what Pete Hegseth believed. Watch Viking Valhalla and you will know exactly who Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, Mike Johnson, John Thune, and the Supreme Court MAGA Republicans. They want at least 3 billion people dead.
One of the things that we really need, as you know, because we've had this conversation, is a research program and Forest Service staffing on the ground in a variety of ways, but particularly at Bartlett Experimental Forest. These small investments in research and staffing and sound management help make the forest economies healthier and more competitive. I very much appreciate your having staff visit Bartlett last week with my staff and with staff from the governor's office. But can you commit to restoring staffing at Bartlett and to keeping the facilities there open now that you've seen the critical nature of that research? Why don't I follow up with you?
We're going to dip out of this for just one moment to check in with our friends and experts. General Hertling, Pete Hegseth is, to use a technical military term, on his best behavior. But there's really an elephant in the room for me here watching this. I mean, the American people have opined on what they have seen Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump do over the last 6 months in Iran. And 70% of Americans disapprove of the war. And as Senator Shaheen says there, why are you asking the American people for more money when you haven't spent the money that's already been allocated? Your thoughts on how this is going?
Well, I don't know what a group of elephants are called. I think it's a herd, but there's a herd of elephants in this room. And what we're seeing is just a horrible presentation by the Secretary of Defense. He's obfuscating every single question with insults to the previous administration, tap dancing around the key questions he's being asked by both sides, by the way. And, you know, every war, Nicole, requires some type of supplemental funding. That's normal. But the more important question is not how much or what's it for. It's what's the strategy? What are you trying to do? What conditions define success? What metrics tell us we're making progress? What could trigger escalation or de-escalation? What's the duration? He's not doing any of that. He's just asking for a chunk of change, a huge chunk of change, almost triple what the normal defense budget is. And what he's basically saying is, we need it. We haven't spent what you've given us already. It's for a bunch of things we haven't explained and we haven't spent yet. So there's an issue of, and Tom Nichols knows this, constraints, restraints, the kinds of effectivenesses and efficiencies that you're supposed to see inside of the budget process in the Department of Defense, and none of that is happening. And instead, Secretary Hegseth is wanting to just basically do a hand wave about how important the president's priorities are and how bad the last administration is. This isn't the time or place for that. It should be going to Congress, a Congress he ignored when they went to war, and saying we need more money for the war and other things that we haven't told you about when the budget cycle started. It, to me, Nicole, is contrary to everything I ever learned in the budget process, and sometimes those processes are draconian, and it just seems willy-nilly in what he's trying to portray in this hearing.
Well, Tom Nichols, you don't have to be expert to know that it lacks seriousness to utter this sentence. He, Donald Trump, should be praised. You know, that is not what you say if you're a serious leader of the Pentagon. That is not what you say about a serious president or commander-in-chief of the United States of America. And that is what Pete Hegseth said about Donald Trump, questioning from Senator Jack Reed.
That's all they know how to do, most of these cabinet secretaries. They're not good at their jobs. Most of them are not qualified for their jobs. And Pete Hegseth, I think, is showing us yet again a staggeringly unqualified for his job. I mean, even very simple aspects, the kind of things that Mark was just talking about the realities of the budget process. You know, things that I saw from the other side as a Senate staffer, for example. Pete Hegseth has no experience with any of this. He has no idea what he's talking about. And he also has no idea what he's talking about, clearly, when it comes to the military realities of this situation. The part that jumped out at me was when he said, well, I mean, Jack Reed asked a great question. Basically, how did you miss that they were going to close the Strait of Hormuz? Like, everyone in the world knows that was going to happen. And he said, well, that's why we sank their Navy. Well, that's a great way of saying that you don't really understand that situation, that you've never sat for a war game about this, you've never seen anything about it, because sinking their Navy was not going to be the thing that was going to stop drone and missile attacks, which is what everybody else in the world knew that the Iranians would do. And instead, we got all of this kind of vaporous nonsense about Joe Biden and Lloyd Austin and, other things that don't really matter. And I think especially in this hearing, to emphasize Mark's point, you're supposed to be sitting there saying, this is what we've done, this is what we've spent, this is what we're achieving, this is what we hope to achieve, this is what we need the money for. And Pete Hegseth, this isn't a TV show. It's not, another 20 minutes on the couch at Fox and Friends. These are people who are asking you how you're going to spend loads of money in an active war, and he can't answer any of those questions because the guy has no idea what he's doing.
We believe that Senator Jeff Merkley of Oregon will be the next questioner. One of the 17 casualties, one of the lives lost in this war, is someone from his home state. General Hertling, your thoughts about what it means for military families watching, both the insults for President Joe Biden, former President Biden, which seemed totally out of place and out of tune, especially in the same news cycle where we're learning the names of another person who lost their life over the weekend.
Yeah, it continues the destruction of trust within our governments and our institutional trust, Nicole. I mean, the old guys did it all wrong. We're doing it all right. So be with us. And, the military, as we've said so many times on this show, doesn't belong to a political party. Secretary Hegseth is trying to associate himself because he spent a limited amount of time in a combat zone with people who understand what war requires and what the military culture is in our country. So it's insulting to many, I won't say all of those who wear the uniform. It's insulting to me that he would try and, use the shield of the uniform to proclaim what he's doing is right and everybody else is wrong, especially in the case of Secretary Austin, who was a 4-star general and spent probably 12 years in combat commanding at every level. Again, this is personal, and that's all he has, because as Tom just said, he doesn't understand the processes and the systems and the theory and the doctrine and how war is waged. He wants to act tough. He wants to be strong. And by the way, the other thing I'd point out, he also admitted to 2 senators that I saw that they are disobeying the law by not passing the $400 billion package to Ukraine at a critical time. They've basically just blown off what the Congress has legislated. So again, all of this compounds that, but from the standpoint of those who we've seen lose their lives and the hundreds who have been injured, there's the comments about them, but I'm not sure it's as important to them as winning in this case, and that's unfortunate.
Well, it's interesting to me that there was no sobering up in light of the tragic news over the weekend, in light of the plunging approval rating. Interestingly, Fox News is not carrying their former colleague, the weekend morning show anchor Pete Hegseth. We'll listen in to Senator Merkley of Oregon.
Move this process.
Yes, absolutely. It is of paramount importance, especially in the middle of fire season right now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Chairman Kane, I think there was a sense that the president expressed at the start of the war that the U.S. military power was overwhelming and would likely produce unconditional surrender quickly by Iran. And that obviously hasn't happened. Was it your opinion as well? Did you feel like our military force could produce an unconditional surrender in quick order?
Sure, I won't, with due respect, I won't share my private advice to the president. What I will assure you and the American people is I always speak truth to power and offer an accurate assessment of what my assessment is of both our readiness, the plans and activities that might be undertaken, the associated risks, and the secondary and tertiary considerations that go with those opinions or options.
Thank you. So you feel like the various risks that the Iran could possibly close the strait, despite the destruction of their navy, that the possibility of assassinating their political leaders and their military leaders could produce a strengthened hardline and weakened reformers, that Iran would have the ability to sustain its ability to attack sites throughout the Middle East, that the initial requirements of the war could surely deplete our basically high-end standoff munitions, that this could affect our relations with our allies. All those were factors well considered in this decision to go to war.
Sir, as I said, I won't opine on or share my private advice to the
And I'm
president.
not asking about your vice president, I'm asking you, did you understand these issues, or have these become revelations as the war's unfolded?
Sir, my job is to understand all of the considerations that go into the carefully considered use of military power.
This is Elder G again. Your sons and your daughters is dying on a war that didn't have to happen. And this guy, a 4-star general, he's up here, I'm not gonna opine because President Trump may fire me. At the same time, somebody just lost 2 sons and a daughter. And this guy that's supposed to look out for our soldiers is up there saying, I can't tell you what I told the president. I can't tell you what I think. That general needs to be fired. Your kids are dying. That question is very easy to answer. I gave President Trump my honest opinion, and Donald Trump told me to go jump off a bridge. Because you just a fake general. Because everybody know that Donald Trump go by what he feel in his guts. That general needs to be fired. And Pete Hegseth needs to be fired.
We have the most professional military force.
It'd just be nice to have you say yes, because this is international law. Yes, you understand the international law.
I do, sir. I've got a lot of lawyers that help me understand.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Will you get back to us on that
Yes,
question
sir,
of
of
whether we
course.
targeted the
Yes, sir.
desalination plants, and
Of
if so, why? My time's up, but I do want to express encouragement to look at what the negotiators have put forward, or advisors, as to whether a 10-day break could facilitate returning to dialogue that might find a path forward.
Senator Hyde Smith.
Celebrity Cruises. Nothing comes close.
From senior to childcare to pets and more, the new Care.com makes it easier than ever to find the care you need. And you don't have to hire just anyone. You can find a background-checked caregiver who's the right fit for you. Join now and find care at Care.com.
There's DNA. Then there's heavy-duty DNA.
Using pods is the best way to move. I wouldn't have trusted anyone else.
They bring...
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and I want to thank all 3 of you for being here today. I am going to direct my first question to Secretary Rollins, and again, I want to commend you publicly for the outstanding job you're doing at USDA. You know, this is my world. As former Ag Commissioner, I hear from a lot of producers in Mississippi, and they are...
We will duck out of this for a moment. Tom Nichols, let me ask you to weigh in on that exchange between Senator Merkley and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Dan Kane, about a commitment to not commit war crimes, essentially. I didn't hear yes or no. I simply heard about a system or a sieve through which targets are pushed at CENTCOM. I didn't hear an affirmative no, we will not commit war crimes in the war in Iran. What did you hear?
Well, just before that, what I heard was, I'm not going to share what I said to the president, but boy, am I worried about the same things you are. When it came to what kind of actions Iran could take, and whether General Kane had thought those things through. I mean, in a way, Senator Merkley's question was a little unfair. Did you really think these things through? Of course, I think the answer in reality is that General King really did think those things through and then had to be really careful about what he was going to say, sitting next to the guy who, according to reports, was the one cheering on, ignoring everybody else and going to war. With the desalinization plants and the war crimes targets, again, General Kane, I think, carefully threading that needle to say, I haven't heard about whether we hit those. I don't know if we hit them or hit them on purpose. And then just defaults to what I think is both a safe and a sensible answer to say there is a process for discriminating targets. That's the pretty much the best I can do here. I think the other problem, though, is that, yes, it would have been nice to hear the chairman of the Joint Chiefs say, in general, of course we follow international law. Of course we try to avoid, anything that is in our own law, is in our own rules and regulations. But that's I think for General Kane, that would have been a restatement of the obvious. I think what Senator Merkley wanted to do was just get it out there on the record and then set up General Kane having to come back to Senator Merkley. You can bet that there's going to be a staffer or somebody, as soon as this thing is done, to say, now give us that answer that you couldn't give us in public.
General Hartley, I know you're leaving us. I want to give you a last word, and I want to ask you, with all that Hegseth has put into the system, the toxic introduction of testosterone for the military, the optics of essentially doing jazzercise with the men and women of the military, to not take the opportunity to express his condolences to Senator Merkley, whose state actually, he represents one of the 17 individuals who lost their life in this war. Just feels like the focus is elsewhere. Your thoughts?
Yeah, when he used the word woke again early on in the testimony, that told me where he was. He was asked questions by Senator Reid, West Point graduate Senator Reid, who spent time in the service, concerning some of the implications of the things he was doing. I think if I were him and going before the Senate, that would be the one individual I would not want to go up against. And when he started trying to pontificate to Senator Jack Reed, it fell through. What you're seeing now, too, I'd kind of comment on the fact that most of the Democrat questions are going to General Kane. Most of the Republican questions are first going to Secretary Rollins. So they seem to be kind of bypassing the Secretary of Defense because they know what he's going to say, and it's not going to be answering their questions.
General Hartling, thank you so much for watching along with us and for being part of our coverage today. You make us all smarter. Let me quickly bring into our conversation former Chief of Staff of the Department of Homeland Security during Donald Trump's first term, Miles Taylor. Miles, I am mostly over wanting these people to be anything other than who they are. But I did think in the wake of tragic loss of life, in the wake of the Eric Schmidt reporting in the New York Times about many, many more injuries than are known, that there might be a moment of transparency. And that is not how today's testimony began.
No, it's not. And you know how these hearings play out, Nicole. And I've been in hearing prep with cabinet secretaries in a Trump administration. And the first thing that they're warned by the White House, and they don't really need to be warned of this, but if they have to be told, the audience is not the American people. The audience is not the senators. There's an audience of one. And he often tunes in to watch his cabinet members testify, and you could hear that in these responses. Even though the chairman of the Joint Chiefs is supposed to be immune from those sort of political debates, you saw a chairman of the Joint Chiefs who was hesitant to say the real things we all suspect he feels, because he knows that big boss is watching. And I was especially concerned, Nicole, about those answers on civilian targets. Not that General Kane gave the wrong answers, but the hesitation demonstrates, and this is my opinion, that there's clearly tension behind the scenes over civilian targeting. Look, the president himself has threatened genocide. He's threatened civilian targets. It's clear he wants to keep targeting them. It's clear that his general is dragging his feet.
Yeah, I mean, Trump keeps posting that, right? This isn't speculation. Let's listen in to Senator Coons.
Who've been wounded and injured in this war in Iran. General Kane, your observations about how our adversaries are aligning more and more closely. Technology is accelerating, and cheap and lethal and easily accessible drones pose greater and greater risks to our troops, our homeland, and our security. And Secretary Hegseth, that we need to protect our troops wherever our president directs them, that we need to protect our partners and allies, and that the dangerous radical Iranian regime should never possess a nuclear weapon. I think we agree on all of these core basic points. Where I think we may disagree is on this supplemental and on the strategic choices made to achieve some of these core goals. We're 143 days into a war with Iran, a war of choice that we started with Israel, but did not include, consult, or incorporate our core allies, our NATO allies, our regional allies, the American people, and Congress. And the reason to consult and include our allies and Congress and the American people is so that when the costs and the length of a war extend beyond what we'd initially imagined, the American people and their representatives in Congress understand that sacrifice and can continue to support it. I think your first strategic mistake was to not consult the American people in Congress and make a clear case for the reasons behind this war. There have been many, lots offered, and I think our military has executed on the core missions. Attack ballistic missile sites, sink the Blue Water Navy, attack their proxies, constrain their capacity. But I frankly think it was entirely foreseeable that Iran would close the Strait of Hormuz, would use cheap, lethal, widely available Shahed drones that they've led the world in manufacturing to attack our bases, our troops, our partners and allies, and impose real costs. Higher costs in fertilizer, in fuel, higher costs for the world, and tragically, increasingly higher human costs for us and for our troops. So, two questions, two general lines of questioning, if I could. Mr. Secretary, your question says, without these supplemental funds, we will face critical shortfalls that threaten our ability to pay our service members and sustain global operations without disruption. You've been asked repeatedly, there's $75 billion appropriated but unobligated. Can we really not avoid critical short-term shortfalls? What does that mean about the budget management within the department in terms of unexpected and unbudgeted wars? First, Operation Southern Spear, and then Operation Epic Fury.
I would just note, I was sort of updated, 95% of that One Big Beautiful Bill funding will be allocated by the end of September in accordance with congressional intent. So these are things we said we would spend, and we told you we would spend them on, and we plan to spend them on those things by the end of September. So this is a new request based on new realities of the world we face, stepping up to meet that moment.
And also, Secretary, but that's news to me, that $75 billion will be out the door, allocated and spent by September. And I was simply questioning how we have ships running out of fuel in the open seas and planes being grounded. And
I didn't say ships were running out of fuel in open seas or planes were grounded. I'm saying that we have to make trade-offs.
Maintenance accounts are
everything our troops need on the battlefield, they're getting in spades and beyond. It's ultimately looking into the future. Can we invest above and beyond that, the types of munitions, fast enough as we upgrade and modernize our force? That's what's at issue here in this $1.5 trillion, this supplemental, and any other additional funding that comes.
Two quite different things: a $1.5 trillion base budget request and a now $76 billion supplemental. And I was simply going to point to Department of Homeland Security is sitting on nearly $100 billion in unobligated funds. You haven't requested reimbursement for the billions of dollars the department has spent on law enforcement. Second,
we requested reimbursement and are getting a substantial reimbursement from DHS.
That's good news, and that's news to me. And frankly, as we reflect on the service and sacrifice of those who put their lives on the line of this war, one of the things I've raised over and over and over is the ways in which this administration has dragged its feet on partnering with Ukraine in order to deploy the best-in-class sensors, detectors, and counter-drone systems to protect everything from Dover Air Force Base to our bases in the region, to our troops, to our partners. I want to see you focus on accelerating the defense of our troops and our nation, focus on accelerating the defense of our troops and this region, and a strategy that has a real chance at succeeding at the goals that we agree on. Because the strategy followed, I think, has no credible likelihood of success.
Senator Britt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate all of you being here today. So since the beginning of the...
This is Elder G again. You see, Donald Trump don't care nothing about your sons and your daughters. Donald Trump, he have no conscience. Donald Trump have no feeling. He spent $45 million on his birthday party. He spent $16 million on a pond, the reflecting pond. All they did was painted the top and the paint peeled right off. He spent $60 million on a UFC fight. At the same time that he doing that, your son and your daughter is dying. And you here in America trying to take away black and brown people's civil rights. Don't you know that the black and brown people and the women are tired? After 450 years of mistreatment, don't you know that we tired? Don't you know that we fed up? Don't you know we done gave you chance after chance after chance? Don't you know we know you ain't no good? Don't you know that we know that you ain't got no faith in God? You don't believe in Christ. You don't even believe in the Constitution. You don't even believe that black and brown people got the same rights that you do. You gutted the Civil Rights Act. You got rid of affirmative action to try to bring us up to be equal. You got rid of a woman's right to choose to have control of their own body. We are not going to let you go any further. We know that all you trying to do is start a civil war. We can't let you come into full power. We just can't let that happen. Thank you.